Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the PGRO Descriptive List launch for Pulses 2024. My name is Roger Vickers. I'm introducing Dr. Chris Judge today, who's going to take us through the work of PGRO variety evaluation over the last 12 months and indeed the last 5 years worth of rolling data. The published list is already available this morning on the PGRO website at pgro.org. You can download the list there in PDF or Excel format. It will also be available in the near future in the winter edition of the Pulse magazine, which will be disseminated through CPM magazine, and you will also be able to read that online. In total, we should be no more than 15-20 minutes of presentation with the opportunity to ask questions through the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. And please feel free to type your questions in there, and we'll come back to those questions when Chris has finished his presentation. We are going to crop tech. Chris will fill you in during the presentation as to how to engage with us there. So, no more from me, Chris. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roger. I'll just share my presentation and we'll start the talk. Okay, so hopefully that's all come up on everyone's screens now. So yes, as Roger said, this is the descriptive list launch for the 2024 descriptive lists. And I'll just be giving you a quick run through on the latest results, the new varieties, and any other highlights from the recent season. So, as part of that, we'll be talking about winter bean varieties, the spring beans, combining bees, and I'm also going to put a tiny bit in about new vining pea varieties at the end as well for anyone interested. But that will just be one quick slide. So we've got new material entering the list. We've got 2 winter beans and 3 spring beans and 7 peas. There is an additional spring bean still pending at time of recording that I'll discuss more when we get to the beans section. We also have a new category of combining peas on the list, pink peas. Again, when we get to the peas, I'll explain all about that. One of the other new things is that we've added chocolate spot disease assessments onto the list for winter beans. We always assess chocolate spot when present, but if we only get it at 1 or 2 locations, we don't consider that enough data to add into the table officially. But within the last 5 years in the data set, there is enough chocolate spot that we're now including it. And the other real change is that there's obviously minor changes in site locations, different fields being used slightly, but again, there's no change to how the data is collected otherwise. So looking at the sites, we've got a rough map of the country here with little markers for where the data has been gathered from. Obviously, we're trying to aim to gain data from a wide range of different soil types in different counties to kind of cover the growing region of the crops involved. So we've got 6 winter bean locations, 10 spring bean and 7 pea, and hopefully you can see that it's quite a wide spread across the country, with the spring beans having the largest distribution up in Northumberland, Hampshire, Kent, Hereford. We're getting quite a spread across the country, which then should hopefully mean that we're reflecting all the major growing areas. So focusing in to winter beans, it's a shorter list than the other 2 lists, but there's still interesting differences between the varieties. So we've got the different markers at the side of the screen here. So it's saying the number of years that they're in the trial set. So we've got a maximum of 5 years. When we have a variety that we've got more than 5 years of data for, the oldest data drops off the list when we gain new data. And then we've got new varieties only have 3 years of data, and then you have things that joined the list last year will then only have 4 years of data before they gain their 5th year in the future. So in the Year 5 category, we've got Vesper, Vincent, Bumble, Norton, Honey and Tundra. Bonneville now has a 4th year, and we have 2 new varieties that I'll be talking about, LG Arctic and Ninja. So here is a graph for some of the interesting data from the winter bean list. So here we're showing in the bars of the graph, we're showing yield. So that is given as the percentage of the controls. So we're not showing tons per hectare, everything's just relative to 100, where 100 is set as the control. And so that control is generated as an average from all varieties that have either 4 or 5 years of data available. So everything other than the new varieties for the winter beans. So looking at these yield data, Vesper is the highest yielding variety with 109% of controls, and Vincent is the second best with 107%. So also on this graph, we have a series of dots going across the graph that you can hopefully see. These are the new scores for chocolate spot that have been added. So chocolate spot, we don't tend to see very strong varietal differences, and you can see that looking at the data that almost every variety has been given the same rating of a 5 on a 1 to 9 scale. However, within the trials that have been included in the data set, there were some differences that our statistics team identified as being deserving of a different rating. And they are for Vincent and Vesper, those 2 that were also the higher yielding, with Vesper having a rating of 7 and Vincent having a rating of 6. So I've now highlighted up in red the 2 new varieties on the list. This is LG Arctic and Ninja. So new edition LG Arctic has above average yield of 104%, and it also has the joint highest downy mildew rating on the winter bean list, which is a 6. I've changed the dots on this graph from chocolate spot over to maturity to help emphasize the fact that Ninja has the earliest maturity on the list of an 8. So as a new variety, it is earlier than Honey that has a rating of a 7, and it also has the highest protein content of any of the winter beans, which you can see here. So the dots have now changed to protein, and you can see that Ninja has 27.3% protein, which is higher than the other winter beans. So then this is what the winter bean complete list looks like. This will be what is available in the magazine, as Roger said, and from the website. So in addition to the traits that I've roughly discussed there, you can find out about other things. So we've also got scores for bean rust, we've got the full scores for downy mildew. You can also look at thousand seed weight and straw length and other traits. Obviously, so I would recommend checking out the full list rather than just the highlights that I've just been through. Moving forwards then onto spring beans. So again, we've got varieties that have been on the list for 5 years, some for 4, some for 3. Additionally here, we have varieties with LTD next to them, which stands for limited trialling. So this is done for older varieties with well-characterized traits that are already well understood what they are like, and they have their trialling reduced to help keep the trial size manageable. So they're not leaving trials and just relying on old data, but they slowly go from having 5 years within the data set down to 3. So we're still refreshing their data 3 years out of 5, but otherwise reducing the amount that we're trialing them as they're already well known and well characterized. The decision to put anything into limited trialing is done in conjunction with the breeder to make sure that they're happy with going into that system. If you only saw the list at this talk last year and you haven't seen any updates, we did update the list in January to add some new varieties that were pending at this time last year. So Futura and Genius and LG Stego were all added last January when they were added on to the variety list / national list, and we updated all our information on the descriptive list online accordingly. So, but you may not have seen data on those if you hadn't been hadn't seen that update in January. So in addition to those 3 that were added mid-season effectively, we've also got 3 new varieties that are on the list in red, and I'll go through all of the highlights on those in the following graphs. So here is yield in blue and downy mildew in the black dots. Again, yield is done as percentage of the controls that have 4 and 5 years, as with the winter beans. So Genius that was added in January is the highest yielding at 108%, just above Lynx that would have been the highest yielding when the list was released last November at 107%. In terms of downy mildew resistances, Lynx has dropped to a 6 in downy mildew. We still have 7s on the list in the form of Speed and LG Viper. And Yukon is the highest downy mildew on the list with a rating of 8. Yukon also has the earliest maturity of any of the varieties. So now the new varieties have been highlighted up in red. So Synergy is a new low vicin and low convicin variety. We call this LVC, and you can see that there's 3 varieties on the graph that have LVC next to their name. So this is low vicin convicin. So these are anti-nutritional traits. You'll have heard us talk about them in previous lists. They've been on the list for a while as an extra quality trait, effectively, for nutrition. And Synergy, which is the new LVC variety, is higher yielding than the other 2 LVC varieties, Futura and Victus. So the other 2 varieties are Navara and LG Hawk, and they have yields of 106% and 101% respectively. So I've now changed the dots at the side over to being rust, and you can see that LG Viper is the best variety for rust with a rating of 7, though new variety Navara has a rating of 6, which is the second best rating for rust available. For protein, in spring beans, Speed has the highest protein, though new variety Synergy and LG Stego and LG Viper all have proteins of above 28%. So then this is the full spring bean list. As before, it's worth checking out the traits other than yield and disease that I haven't talked about. So you can look at the straw length, you can look at the thousand seed weight, you can look at the maturity data, and you can also see when each individual variety was added to the list and how much data is involved in it. So moving forwards onto the peas. So as I said before, we've got a new category of pea. We have the pink peas in addition to the yellows. And here we've got a picture of both next to each other. So hopefully the picture is clear enough that you can see that the pinks have a distinct different appearance from the yellow varieties. So within the yellow category, we've got Chameleon, Orchestra, Manager and Rivoli with 5 years of data. We've got Glam and LG Ajax with 4 years. And then we've got the 3 new yellow peas and the 1 new pink pea. We'll show their data in a second, but we'll first of all discuss the green peas. So here we've got Greenway, Stroma, Mika, Blue Time, Cactus, Karaoke and Carrington at 5 years. Butterfly, KWS Gotham, LG Aviator and Karavi 4 years. And then we've got 2 new varieties in Reacher and Shazam. And we also in green peas, as in the beans, we have got some established varieties within limited trialling. Within the maple peas, both varieties are well established, Montara and Rose, and are in limited trialling. Within the marifats, we've got Sakura, Octavia, and Akuma. Takayama moves to having a 4th year of data when it was new before, and we've got a new variety in Vision. So we'll move now on to some of the P data. So here we're now showing a graph of just the yellow and pink peas, with the dots at the side being downy mildew. So now the new varieties are highlighted up as we did before, and you can see that Concerto and Battiste as new varieties are also the top yielding varieties within the yellow peas. Concerto's got a yield of 115% and Battiste 113%. Concerto also has a downy mildew rating of 7, as does LG Ajax and Flamingo, but the highest rating is still Rivoli with an 8. Kedula Flam is also new and has a yield of 110%. And as we said, Flamingo is the first pink pea, so there's no other pink pea to compare it to, but it does have a lower yield than all of the yellow peas. I'll discuss some more traits that are in the yellow and pink peas in a second after we've had a quick look of the yield of the greens, maples and marrowfats. So here, as before, we've got yield in the bars and downy mildew within the dots. So Carrington remains the top yielding green pea at 111% of controls. Both Carrington and Blue Time within the green peas have a rating of 8 for downy mildew. You'll also hopefully see that a lot of green peas have a rating of 7. There's generally quite a lot of good resistance to downy mildew now within the pea population. Mantara and Rose are still the only two maple peas, and they've both got excellent downy mildew ratings of 9. So the new varieties within this section. So we've got a new green pea called Shazam, which is a later maturing variety with the joint longest straw out of all of the green peas, but it still has a standing ability of 7. And Reacher, the other new green pea addition, has resistance genes for pea seed-borne mosaic virus and peonation mosaic virus. It's always good when additional traits are being looked at. And then within the marrowfats, we have the new variety Vision, which becomes the top yielding marrowfat with a yield of 100%. And it also has the best downy mildew rating for any marrowfat. It's the only one that is a 7. So now looking at powdery mildew, we have Manager within the yellow peas has moderate resistance to powdery mildew. LG Ajax, LG Aviator, and the new variety Reacher all have high resistance to powdery mildew. So you can see, looking at all of the peas together, there isn't that many options with the powdery mildew resistances. So if you're finding powdery mildew resistances is a trait that you're looking at, there's only a few options. And then in protein in the peas, the maple peas have high levels of protein, and Flamingo does also have quite a bit of a higher protein than a lot of the yellows do. Within the marrowfats, Octavia has the highest protein. Then the combining peas in general, here's the full list. It's quite obviously a long list. It might be not super easy to see there. But again, we also have information on straw length and standing, 1,000 seed weight, and information on what year they were added to the list. So as Roger said at the start, the list is now available to download from the PGRO website. It's printed in the winter issue of the Pulse magazine. It's also now live on the PGRO app. I've already recorded an episode of Inside the Pod, the PGRO podcast, which will be available to listen to some of this information in a different format. And this webinar is also being recorded and will be available to rewatch. On the version on the website, there is also additional information that isn't in the main table, showing breakdowns of some of the yield data between the different years, so you can see the consistency of the different varieties. So if you're especially interested, it can be worth looking at that more detailed version. I said I'd have a quick mention of the new vining peas as well. So there's 2 new additions to the vining pea descriptive list and no new petit pois this year. They're both conventional varieties that have been added. And so we're showing a little bit of data here on the screen that is from the full analysis that's been added to the main list. So both new varieties, Darling and Larango, are late season varieties. Both have good yields. Darling is semi-leafless, and Larango is conventional leaved. Darling has good field resistance to downy mildew, and Larango has high resistance to powdery mildew. So if you're interested in the full vining pea descriptive list, it's also now available on the PGRO website. It's also available in the app, and when the vegetable magazine comes out later on, it will be available there as well. So a bit of a summary, we've got new material added to all of the lists, often quite strong material, and it's looking good in general for the descriptive list going forward. We've had lots of good new candidate varieties coming forward that are going into trials for the next season, a lot of promising material coming forward, so we're quite happy on that front. And in general, the future is looking good for new varieties coming forwards. I'm happy to take questions in a minute. If people are putting them in the Q&A section, Roger will put them to me in a second, but feel free to get in touch at any other time with PGRO to ask anything else about the descriptive lists. And particularly, I want to say, do come see us at Crop Tech. We'll be at Crop Tech on Wednesday and Thursday this week. We've got a stand, we'll have some physical printouts of the new list. Feel free to come discuss them with us. I'll ask us anything else about pulses, and we'll be happy to help you as much as we can. And I'll pass back over to Roger to run any questions that anyone has. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Chris. There's a lot of information there in a very short space of time, and I'm sure that there'll be a lot of questions that people will have as they take the opportunity to digest what you've said. And it's not necessarily the best of formats here online to type your question out instantly, but we have got one question come in, and it relates to the market of pink peas. What market is the new pink pea category aimed at?
Obviously, you can speak to Cope Seeds and Grain, who are providing Flamingo, about their intentions for it, but it is already being grown commercially. So it's already available in a couple of places. It's already being sold. So it's very much heading for its own niche, as it's got I was speaking to them. I think they're aiming at possibly looking at micronizing and pet food as part of it, but it's also being sold as just an edible pea for human consumption, with the pink color as a draw and a factor for it as well. But again, I'm sure Cope Seeds and Grain will happily talk about further plans they have for it as well. I think they're quite keen on it as a new novel variety, and like as I said, it's already been grown commercially.
Great, thanks, Chris. As I said, people are probably struggling to frame their questions and type them out quickly now. But there are no more questions that have come forward, Chris, at the moment. Oh, there's another one. Hang on a second. Hang on.
I'm saying people can come see us at Crop Tech, drop me an email anytime. And if there's any journalists writing an article who want to check anything, just get in touch and I'll clarify anything or look up any proper data on things.
Yeah, there's just one more question, a journalist question. On a general note, have you got any information about seed availability for next spring? Having talked to the breeders, Chris.
Yeah, so obviously a lot of breeders, if they've got a new varieties that's just entered the list, they often don't have the seed stocks to be supplying it to lots and lots of people. Obviously, we've looked at their seed production stats as part of the discussions for the list, but there is often a bit of a delay that they've only got limited availability of the very newest varieties onto the list. But in general, nobody has been really flagging up major issues with any of their varieties. Certainly, nobody's mentioned major issues with any of their established varieties, but new lines do often have a smaller amount available. So if you're really keen to try one of the new lines, I recommend getting in touch with the provider sooner rather than later.
Okay, Chris. Thanks very much.
I think there's a few more questions, Roger. Now it says 4 at the bottom of my screen.
Well, I'm not seeing them, Chris, on my screen. So just try and adjust this a second. Okay, so we've got one from Tom. What work is being done to try and reduce the yield differences, especially in peas? 11.4% is still quite high. I'm guessing Tom's referring there to the significant differences in the trial.
Yeah. Obviously, we're always trying to grow trials to the same protocol in very similar conditions. I think a lot of the variability comes from the fact that we do try and grow things on quite a wide range of locations and a wide range of types. It'd be nice if the data became more consistent over time, but peas are never going to probably have that same level of tight confidences that you see in crops like wheat.
Okay, thank you. And then I'm not sure that we're in a position to answer this question, Chris, and that it's a multifaceted one, but growers are interested in using peas as companions in cereals. Any thoughts and suggestions on varieties? My immediate response to that, and I'll let you elaborate, but is that it depends what you're trying to do. Are you trying to grow it as a crop or simply as a companion? And
yeah,
if it's simply as a companion, and there is the issue of rotational frequency to consider as well. But if you just address that in terms of intercropping, Chris, is there a specific variety, perhaps?
Again, when in our intercropping work that we've done at PGRO, we've been mainly focusing on, getting timings right, getting rates right, focusing on some of the basics rather than looking at how different varieties interact with it. But as Roger says, it depends on what you're doing. And so feel free to get in touch if you've got a specific plan. It depends what companion you're putting it with. But I think you will always want to look at the maturity of the variety you're using in terms of if you've got intercrops, which would typically have different harvest dates to each other, you may want to look at an early variety or a late variety accordingly of your pea and bean to just try and make that harvest process easier. But again, it really depends what you're putting it with. It really depends on what your end use is. Depends if you're just looking for something to add to nitrogen fixation, or it depends if you're really treating it as its own important crop to your farm in its own right. So again, if you're setting up an intercrop field and you want to discuss, hey, what varieties am I doing? These are my priorities. We're really happy to take phone calls on that.
Okay, well, we managed to get full vision on the questions, Chris. I can see that there are no more questions there at the moment. So I'm going to draw this to an end by thanking everyone for attending, and just to remind you that there are various ways you can obtain the information for the descriptive list. The website, the magazine, the podcast, the recording of this event, and of course by coming to see us at CropTech on Wednesday and Thursday this week. So thank you very much, Chris. Thank you all for listening and attending this morning, and we'll see you all again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.